Welcome into another great edition of the Weekend Tailgate. You got Ike Jones here, and we are going to talk today about building a college program in today's climate of collegiate football. Is the transfer portal the new way to do that, or are the tried and true ways of building it through high school best? Let's talk about it right here on the Golden's Cast Iron Weekend Tailgate right here. Let's do it.
This is the Weekend Tailgate. Brought to you by Golden's Cast Iron. C-Dub. Ike Jones. Be Will. Mike G. You are now listening to
The Weekend Tailgate, brought to you by show sponsor Golden's Cast Iron. Whether you work out, grill out, or chill out, Golden's Cast Iron has got you covered. Make sure you hit them up at goldenscastiron.com/WR to get 15% off of weights. You need to use code Get Your Weight Up. If you want $65 off of your fire pit or Kamado grill, you need to be using code TWR. If you are out here and listening to us, make sure that you are doing the necessary by getting this content out there and sharing it with somebody on social media or wherever you like to share content. And we definitely appreciate that very much. Before we get into today's content, Mike G, tell the people about all the wonderful things that they can do to help support the War Report.
You can hit that join button, right? $5.99 a month. You guys have been joining at a crazy rate. We need to sign up all of Auburn fandom. That's our goal now. All of them. Everybody who's ever fanned out about Auburn, hit that join button. $5.99 a month. Tell a friend, tell your grandma, tell your dad, because it's Father's Day. Maybe gift him a membership. By hitting that gifted membership button. You guys have been doing this like crazy too. We appreciate all our patrons for gifting memberships to others. Our community is growing. Ike and I are going out to media days next month, and we need your support because we're going to be bringing you guys lots of content from media days. It's going to be exciting times. So help us do that by hitting that gifted membership button and blessing somebody with the War Report. Also want to shout out show sponsor Rogue Shop. Visit rogueshop.com and use code report to get 15% off your order. They've been longtime supporters of us. We appreciate them for sponsoring the channel. Check us out on podcast, guys. All the podcast networks, Auburn Express, Uptempo, College Loop, and Just a Sec, bringing you a variety of audio-only content. Whether you're at the gym, at work, on the way to work, we got you covered in audio-only format. It's a little safer in the car, right, than YouTube. So listen to us on podcasts. We appreciate everybody for doing that. And last but certainly not least, I want to shout out show sponsor Golden's Cast Iron. Visit goldenscastiron.com/report. Make sure you use that URL and use code Get Your Weight Up for 15% off your weights. Code TWR for $65 off fire pits and Kamado grills. Guys, it's Father's Day. I got my dad a Kamado last Father's Day. And let me tell you something. We are eating on that bad boy today. So create memories with your dad, like I will be creating memories of my dad. And I know Ike. I know how Ike feels about his dad. And we're going to all have a good time around the Golden's Cast Iron Fire Pit. So, please support them. Longtime sponsors of the War Report. We appreciate them for sponsoring the show.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate everybody who is out there celebrating Father's Day today. You know, I got my cool dad shirt on that was gifted to me.
Happy Father's Day to you, man. Yeah, I mean, you are a father, and I admire that you are putting good human beings into the world. I'm not a father, but I have a father.
But shout out to all the fathers out there in the War Report fandom. We appreciate y'all for stopping through and spending some of your Father's Day with us, and everybody else who's just out here kicking it with us that's not a father. Appreciate y'all coming through today as well. We're about to sun somebody real quick in regards to some absolutely ridiculous takes that they've had. But we're going to get into the conversation today. Since it's Father's Day. But yeah, so the question or the conversation came up from a statement made out there in podcast land, radio land, about college recruiting and building a collegiate roster right now. And we got a clip of the audio that kind of prompted today's conversation. So we're going to play the clip just to give context. But the question that we're going to ask is around how you build a program in today's climate of NIL and the transfer portal, all of the things, how to do that best. So the clip, for context, is coming from the 3-Man Front show that is out there. I believe it's on Jocks Radio, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Our guy, Pat Smith, I go on there regularly, and I love those guys over there. They do great work. Our guy, Cole Kubelik, is over there on Jocks, as well as Greg McElroy, who we work with. So, it was SEC Mike. Mike Brayton is his name. Follow him on Twitter at SEC Mike, and he made the comment we're about to play for you now.
Yeah, so we're going to play his comments, and then we're going to come back and have a quick discussion about it. Let's hear what SEC Mike had to say about not just in general, but he made some very specific comments about the way Coach Hugh Freeze is building his program. But let's take a listen.
I'm not buying the hype. I don't like the way Hugh Freeze is going about this. I ain't spending $1 million on a quarterback, but you don't have to go to the dollar store to get a quarterback either, Hugh. I think his reputation is overblown because he beat Alabama twice. People forget that he lost to Vanderbilt twice in that same span. I think he is not an elite coach, and I don't like the way he's building it through high school. You could do that 4 or 5 years ago. I think you have to do it in the portal these days. I think there's a good chance heading into next season, Hugh Freeze is on one of the hotter seats in the SEC.
All right, comments there from SEC Mike. Let's address a couple of things before we get into the meat of the conversation that we had. That we have on tap for his comments. First and foremost, he says he's not buying the hype of Coach Hugh Freeze, right? He's not buying into whatever everybody's trying to sell about him. He's a little overblown, overrated, number one. And I mean, I guess we can debate about how overrated Coach Hugh Freeze is,
or how hype he is.
I was about to say, I think that's a little like I think you're making more of Coach Hugh Freeze than I think everybody else is, but I think that's debatable. This is where I want to camp out for just like half a second before we get into our full conversation, because hearing the comments again, it made me remember this portion of it. He said specifically, quoting something from Hugh Freeze, that I don't want to spend $1 million on a quarterback. He said, but on the other side, you don't have to go to the dollar store to get a quarterback. Is that a shot at Peyton Thorne, calling him a dollar store quarterback?
I'm going to go with no.
Okay.
Yeah, I think what he was trying to do there was to say there's a medium between, paying $1 million and just getting just any old guy to come in through the portal. Maybe not.
Which I agree with 100%.
Yeah. And so I think maybe that's where I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt there. Like, I think that's where he was trying to go. I met SEC Mike at Media Days when we were there, Ike, 2 years ago, Atlanta. And, again, seemed like a nice guy. Introduced himself, gave me his card. And, at the time, I don't know. Like I said, our listeners have told me repeatedly since yesterday that there's a history with this guy and Hugh Freeze that maybe even predates Auburn. And, there could be some biases there, which is why he kind of made that stretch. But, just my thought. I think that's I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt there and say that's where he was going, focusing on the medium between.
I mean, that's fine. I just don't understand, like, you don't have to go to the dollar store to get a quarterback, as if, the Auburn has like nobody playing quarterback right now. So like, I don't know. Anyway, all right. So let's go back to building the program.
I get you. Like you got a guy who averaged about 3,000 yards in his 2 previous seasons prior to getting to Auburn. So that's not exactly the dollar store. I'm with you. And led an 11-2 squad while throwing for 3,200 yards. So, that's not the dollar store. Peyton Thorne is not a dollar store quarterback. Yeah.
All right. Other portion of what he said. Coach Hugh Freeze, he has a feeling, will be on the hot seat going into not this season coming up, but the next season. So is he forecasting Auburn not having a good? Because I mean, if he's going to be on a hot seat, that means Auburn's got to have a bad year.
Yeah. I'm glad you asked this question exactly this way. right? So to say that Hugh Freeze is going to be the hot seat going into next season, you're predicting a 6-6 or worse season.
That's the only way I can
Only
see that
way he
being the
ends up
case.
in the hot seat, right?
Not
Like
with the way that he's recruiting, you have to have a terrible outcome on the field for a hot seat to even be in the conversation.
correct, yeah. So he's predicting a 6-6 season, and he's saying Auburn makes no progress this season at all.
Yeah,
that's it. Statistically, they don't move forward, and yes, that would land him on the hot seat. I think
Yes.
going into year 3.
I
But
would agree.
How likely is that, though? Right? I mean, you've got to miss on a lot for that to be true. Think about this. Again, you had enough talent to beat Alabama last year. Fact, right? 4th and 31. New Mexico State, yeah, okay, they brought their A game. If you watch the recent mix segment that we did with Elijah McAllister, I asked him about that game. I said, how does that happen? And, look, it happens. Give them credit, but that's not a game he's likely to lose again. Right? You can play that game 100 times. He's not going to lose that game again. So there are 2 wins just sitting out there. That if you get those this year, you're an 8-win team, which definitely wouldn't have him on the hot seat.
Right.
So he is forecasting like regression for Auburn in year 2. And I've been pretty consistent about this. If you are not moving forward, you're moving backwards. In my mind, in the SEC, there's no such thing as standing still, because while you're standing still, everybody else is getting better. Right. So if you're not moving forward, you're moving backwards, and I don't think there's any in between there. How likely is it that Auburn moves backwards? Very, very, very unlikely. Cam Coleman has to be a bust. Perry Thompson has to be a bust. Malcolm Simmons has to be a bust. Bryce Kane has to be a bust. Jarquez Hunter has to regress, right? Like, nobody behind Jarquez Hunter can do anything. And if you believe what everyone told us about this wide receiver core the last couple of years, it couldn't have been any worse. Rivaldo Fairweather would have to regress. I mean, 6 wins was so unlikely last year, even with the talent that they had. It was kind of a perfect storm of like coaching mishaps and, talent gap issues. But yeah, I just don't see how you could look at this, barring mass injuries to very important positions,
right,
and say that they're going to be the same or worse than 6-6. Like, that's not based in anything factual. That is projecting based on what you feel he's done in the past. But even if you look at his past, there's no statistical basis for that in anything that he's done in his past.
Yeah.
Everywhere he's been, he's moved it forward in year 2.
Year 2, he's gotten better at every stop that he's played.
Yeah, so I don't know. I don't know. I have more to say, but I'll stop there and let you.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. Like, I just don't know how you land there based upon anything that's actually transpired to this point. I'm not predicting an Auburn national championship, but to say Coach Hugh Freeze, I have a feeling he will be on the hot seat, is a very different statement from if Coach Hugh Freeze doesn't pull it together this season, he'll be on the hot seat. Correct. That to me is a more balanced and logical thing to say than to say, I have a feeling this is going to happen next year. Well, I'm not buying into the hype.
Well, again, to be clear, there's a scenario where he does land on the hot seat in year 3. Yeah. It just involves a lot of very unlikely events, right, that would be worst case scenario. And even if those things happened, right? Like, if those things happened, I would argue a lot of things that would lead to a 6-6 season would be freakish things that you would probably give him a pass on.
That's exactly where I would go next. Is like the convergence of things that would have to happen that lands you there. You'd have to believe it was all because of poor coaching decisions on Coach Hugh Freeze's part. Oh, like, for instance, him deciding, Peyton Thorne's playing terribly. Let's just keep playing. Let's ride it out through this. Like, that kind of stuff. Okay, all right. I could see someone saying, all right, wait a minute, Coach Freeze.
Yeah.
Are you sure you understand what we need to be doing here from the quarterback position?
Or repeated awful play calls that cost you multiple games late in the fourth quarter. Right. Like, where it's just kind of
multiple, right? Like, not 1 or 2. Like, it's got to be 2 or 3 games where you really had a chance to win this game, and you made some very
bad calls. Yeah.
Strategic, not calling a timeout in a scenario where you should have, or calling a timeout in a dumb spot, or going for it on 4th down inside your own territory, multiple, like crazy Lane Kiffin.
Coaching malpractice.
Yeah.
Essentially, he'd have to commit coaching malpractice to land up on the hot seat. But again, what in his past are you looking at that suggests that will be the case in year 2?
Right.
That's it. Again, I have some more points I'm going to get to, but let's work through this here because there's a lot to unpack.
Let's go to the crux of the conversation, right? Which is the thing I think that's the most interesting thing for us and our purposes is the statement was about he does not feel, SEC Mike does not feel as if Coach Hugh Freeze is building this program the correct way for the current climate of collegiate football. He made the statement that Coach Hugh Freeze, who has noted in saying, he said it to you, he said it to us multiple times, that he believes the way to do this is to build it from high school, which, let me go ahead and spoiler alert, I've said it before, I agree with, is the correct way to do this. Build it from high school. SEC Mike disagrees. He says that you've got to do it from the transfer portal, which is kind of, let's just park out on how crazy it is.
Yeah.
How crazy it is to say that as if Coach Hugh Freeze is adopting a Dabo Swinney approach, which is, I'm not going to take anybody from the portal. It's just going to be the guy. Like, if he were talking about Dabo in that statement, I might say I might understand how he has pitted Coach Freeze against the transfer portal. But Coach Freeze has taken plenty of transfers in his first 2 seasons. So I'm not really sure I understand making it Coach Hugh Freeze being an anti-portal guy. But let's just talk about the actual conversation here is, what do we feel like is the most important, and how is that going to impact the way that you build a program? Is it high school recruiting, or is it leaning heavily into the transfer portal?
Look, if we're talking about sustainability, it is 100% high school recruiting. Look, the line, all the outside of the skill positions, right? The things that have set the SEC apart from other conferences consistently have been offensive and defensive line. The monsters in the middle, and those guys they're not a lot of portal guys there. Those are guys who come up in your system from high school and they develop and they step in and you know, they get big and strong under your tutelage. And think about it. This is finding offensive linemen in the portal has been so difficult for Auburn. You know why? Because there's just not a ton of them there. You got to recruit those guys from high school. You have to recruit those guys from high school. And, you know, that's where I think this is at, right? Like, I think that you have to be focused on high school, and you have to be focused on finding guys who you can develop in your culture. If you're not doing that, right, you're essentially just going out and hiring mercenaries every year to come in. That's it. And literally hiring because of what it's going to cost you to get those guys. I'm sorry, but like, you don't have enough money to go out and get all the guys you need.
Yeah, I think that's a key portion of this is, yes, the transfer portal is useful, but how do you get to because I'm assuming he's talking about building a championship roster, not just putting 22 guys out on the field. How do you get to a championship roster building that without having strong high school recruiting to undergird it? Like, how many guys can you feasibly get from the transfer portal that are going to be difference makers for your team without having strong high school recruiting as well? Like, I don't know how you juxtapose those two things. To your point, you're basically turning yourself into a mercenary squad where it's like, you know, we're gonna hire the best. Like, how many guys are transformational in that way towards your program that you feel like are going to be necessary if you're going to abandon doing it via the high? I just don't know what those numbers look like.
But also claiming that he's not focusing on the portal is
it's weird. Like, how is Hugh Freeze the poster boy for that?
Yeah, I don't understand that either, because in his first season he went to the portal for a quarterback.
Correct.
In his first season, he went to the portal and he spent money on a quarterback. And you know, they went and they tried to get some guys. They went out and they got Batee, right? And they got Peyton Thorne, and they went out and got pieces,
multiple
shorter
wide receivers.
like
went out and got defensive linemen, the linebackers.
Now, your options are limited at first in the portal because of where your program is at, right? Because you're trying to make Auburn an attractive spot for recruits from the portal to want to land. And you can't do that. That takes time.
Right.
I don't like all of this takes time. And that takes me to my last point, about this in particular. When Hugh Freeze got hired, because circling back around the hot seat conversation, when Hugh Freeze got hired, a conversation was had between him, athletic director John Cohen, and the president of the university about what the strategy was for getting Auburn back to where they need to be.
Right.
And Freeze has been adamant that the way to do that is through high school, and it's going to take some time. It's recruiting. Everyone complained about recruiting under Harsin. Well, to recruit, you don't even know how a recruiting class is going to turn out until 2-3 years down the road.
Right.
For sure. So that takes time. So to say that they all agreed on how to build this thing, but then in the same breath to say he's going to land up on the hot seat in year 3 doesn't make any sense.
I mean, listen, to Coach Hugh Freeze, again, for all of sometimes we feel like the messaging is a little off. He's been very clear on what the directives have been from, he said this himself. If by year 3, we're not landing top 5 classes, we're all going to be looking for jobs. That to me says there's a very clear directive from the administration. Go out there and recruit some high caliber guys or go find another job. And he went out there with a ferocity and said, I am going to attack this recruiting like never before and make sure that becomes a priority for me on my day-to-day. So if you're doing the stuff people who hired you asked you to do, how do you then also land on the hot seat? And he's doing it well. It's not as if he has a focus on high school recruiting and he's failing
at it. Right.
He's kicking ass.
Yeah, right. Remember, everyone got up in arms when I said this, oddly enough, on 3-man front. Maybe they're a magnet for controversial statements. Well, I went on 3-man front and I told the world, outside of recruiting, Hugh Freeze's year 1 wasn't much, if any, better than Harsin's year 1.
Yeah, and which I agreed with. I've said that on this show, and I
fired
both for it too. Yeah,
fired both coordinators, right? Embarrassing loss, like last-minute loss to Alabama, blown Iron Bowl, embarrassing bowl game loss, 6-6, except for Freeze added the G5 loss.
Right.
Now, that's terrible, right? But he preached that it was going to take time. And the thing that he did set out to do was establish a good recruiting base. He succeeded at that. He succeeded at that. So I don't know, I just don't know how you can look at all that when you're talking about Auburn and say, oh, well, he's going to be on the hot seat in year 3. No, it would have to be like some 2012 3-9 stuff.
Yeah.
And when you're losing that many games, it really, really points to some other kind of dysfunction going on in a program. Like what we heard about Gene Chizik after 2012 was that he was losing the locker room and guys were doing crazy things. And there was a lot of other things that were going on inside the program there that got him fired after winning a national title just like 2 years before. So if yours predict, I don't know how you would predict that that's going to happen under Freeze. Well, I mean, if you are doing that, something the rest of us don't know. You're inside the coach's filing cabinet at that point.
Yeah.
Looking at documents, and something the rest of us don't know. Other than that, I think he's asked for patience. I think he has it from his administration, and he's just trying to make sure it stays there for fans so they stay positive for the players while they work through this process.
Yeah.
He's been very, very consistent on that. And to say, you can say, okay, I disagree with it, but acting like that can't work, there's no chance that's going to work.
Well, I mean, so that's the question that we ask, right? Does it make sense to build it from high school, right? And
100%.
I don't know. I don't know how this becomes transfer portal versus high school, right? You can lean into one more than you lean into the other. But I'd still argue outside of Florida State last year, who had an immaculate run towards a playoff contention program, right? There aren't examples of guys who have played this lease program and had success. And Florida State, you can argue, got penalized for it because the guy that they brought in for quarterback, who was the linchpin of the whole thing, he goes down. And now all of a sudden everybody's like, well, you guys don't deserve to go any further. And they've got all of these talented guys from the transfer portal. The vast majority of that team came from the transfer portal, of the key contributors for that Florida State team.
Yeah.
But you can't point to examples of teams that have, in this new era, built these powerhouse programs in the transfer portal. It doesn't exist.
Yeah, I would say that if there's an exception to this rule, it's probably Lane Kiffin.
I still don't know. I mean, how is he an exception to what does he want?
He's if there were a 12-team playoff last year, 10-2 is nothing. I mean, they lost 2 games and they only lost to Georgia.
Yeah, I'm not saying that he doesn't have a good program. I'm asking I'm talking about the standard is championship football, right? Like, where is the championship for the portal kings out there, for the guys who've been killing it in the portal?
I agree with that. I'm just saying, like he's kept his team competitive and way above 500 for a few years while getting a large percentage of guys from the portal. That's as close to an example I could point at from somebody who is probably more focused on portal than high school recruiting. But he also does a really good job developing quarterbacks, and he evaluates very well, I think. He has a system. It hasn't gotten him over the hump yet. And I would argue it's not really talent that's holding him back. I think it's coaching that's holding him back personally. Like, he does some things really well, but and he's a really good play caller, but is he the best crunch time play caller? I don't know. I think there's enough talent there at Ole Miss to win. But again, sure. they're 100%.
I think he's put together a phenomenal team this year too. He's probably has his best conglomerate of talent that he's ever had at one time.
Yeah, but he's absolutely the anomalous data point in this, and there may be 2 other coaches at major college football that can take this strategy and be successful. The rest of them, right, like the Ohio States, these guys find diamonds in the rough, but it's because they built successful programs through high school recruiting. And if you're a prime quarterback and you're trying to make a decision about where to go play football, and that takes me to my other point about this whole portal thing. Like, you can't just focus on portal and then just be good at. I would argue that portal recruiting is more competitive than high school recruiting in today's day and age when you add the dollars in, right?
Yeah, easily.
Because there are a small percentage of guys in the portal that are worth the investment.
Right.
And you're battling all the top dogs for those guys. Where at the high school level, there may be more diamonds in the rough. Think about it. From the portal, these guys have fleshed out for the most part. There are not a ton of guys that are transferring because if things are going so great, they're not transferring.
Right.
A large percentage of a majority of the guys in the portal, it didn't work out where they were at. And a lot of the good names in the portal are just coming from programs where they're already overstocked with talent, right? And you know why they're overstocked with talent? Because they have a strong high school recruiting.
Right.
Either way, this thing comes back to high school recruiting. You cannot escape it. Hugh Freeze understands that, and I think that it was a great strategy for him in terms of buying himself and his staff the patience from the administration to let him build this thing up. Now, he did tout that he turns programs around quickly, but I think he's realistic as well too. That hey, once I get a look at where Auburn is at on the lines and where he felt like the skill positions were at, you've got to go out, and he felt like he had to find a Cam Coleman. I'll end on this. So last show we talked a lot about Juju Lewis,
Mm-hmm.
and Auburn going out to get Juju Lewis, and there were a lot of people in our comment section arguing about the implications of Auburn going after Juju Lewis. There's a couple things we agree on. You got to recruit that position every single year, no matter what. Right. I think in today's college football, going after a guy like Juju Lewis, given where the rest of your roster is at that position, means that if you're bringing that guy in, it's likely that there's going to be a strong push to play him immediately as well, too.
Right.
So it's tough. Like, you got to feel like he's a transformational talent, I think, if you're going to play him early. Well, when you look at the guys that, Auburn has gone after, they have been guys that will immediately raise the bar in those rooms. Now, like in the portal, you're just not going to get a high percentage of those guys. And this is where the money comes in. Where he's saying, well, you don't have to go to the dollar store, right? And there's a happy medium.
I have to wonder if this is all about the quarterback, though, because
right.
It has to, the vast majority of this has to center around the quarterback position. Because you look at the rest of the roster, how many transfers right now, and we'll do a whole thing and diving into the portal, but like, it's not as I'm baffled by this. Is he's not doing the thing where he's like, I don't want to go to the transfer. He goes to transfer portal and gets a bunch of that are contributing on a consistent basis.
But he also is very judicious about how he's just not throwing money into the transfer portal hoping to hit the lottery, right? They're really evaluating whether those guys fit what they're trying to do and whether to go after them or not. And we told everybody this offseason they would not go after a portal QB and got called names. And, I said, listen, he's going to have to be a really kind of game-breaking guy for them to go this route. A can't miss at this point, because you
can't miss guys cost too much.
They cost a lot of money, and you're battling a lot of programs for those guys. So if you're trying to balance recruiting strong quarterbacks from high school with getting game changers out of the portal, it's a difficult discussion, because what they're going to see is, if I'm a freshman, if I'm a 5-star freshman, I want to be starting by year 2 latest in today's college football. If you're bringing in some guy with 3 years worth of experience, but like 2 years of eligibility left to play, that might mean year 3 for me. And you don't want to, a lot of kids don't want to go in knowing that they're probably going to be sitting behind a guy for 2 years. Meanwhile, a lot can happen in those 2 years. This is why kids are not patient anymore, Ike. They want to hit the field because they're always trying to bring somebody in that's better than you. Yeah. And you're willing to wait that out in today's college football 1 year at the most. And then you want to be the guy. That's the situation. It was an absolute shock that Texas got Arch Manning to come back to me. Right? I was like, because you just never know what's going to happen. And he feels like I have start now talent. Yeah. There was a lot of noise in the Texas fan base about whether the investment into Arch was so much that Ewers was going to get benched.
But you see, it cost him Malik Murphy in that entire process.
It did. It cost you somebody.
Right.
And so that's the balance that Hugh Freeze has to do, right? Because it's not just the guys on your roster that it might cost you. It's the guys, the game changers, the program changers out of high school that it might cost you when you go after. All these kids are looking at this. You took a top wide receiver. Why would I come to your program?
Right.
I'm be sitting behind this guy. So, Hugh Freeze is still building the model for what prospective student athletes are going to look at when they consider Auburn, and they haven't shown it quite yet on the field. And this year is about taking one more step towards putting something on the field, Ike, that athletes can look at and say, I fit into that.
Right.
Then your recruiting becomes more clear through the portal and through high school.
Yeah.
Give these portal guys something to look at right now.
And that's the other difficult thing, right? Is like Coach Hugh Freeze in last year didn't do enough on the field to really convince any of the top portal targets that this was a good landing spot for them.
Yeah, you can go after them, sure, but it doesn't mean they're going to come to your program. Yeah. So the whole focus, the idea of you're not focusing enough on this, look, it might not be a good idea for him to focus on it based on where his program is at. Because
what he's good at, like, why am I going to try to do something? I know I'm good at this. He's great at high school
recruiting. Yeah.
Anybody who would argue that Coach Hugh Freeze is not good at high school recruiting is being disingenuous. That's like me trying to convince you that Lane Kiffin isn't good at going after the transfer portal. He is.
Yeah, he's very good at it. Yeah.
I'd never say that. That's a silly thing for me. As many things as I've said about Lane Kiffin that can be construed as negative, it's just a lot of it I say on purpose. I would never say he's not good at going and getting transfer portal targets. Like, he does it well. But the question here still remains, like, or I guess the statement is, I don't know that they showed enough offensively last year for top. Keandre Lambert-Smith is probably, I don't know what they had to say to that young man to get him to come to, like, honestly, like, if I'm a top wide receiver target, I don't know how I land at Auburn. Like, just being honest, based upon what you've shown on the field so far as passing is concerned.
Right.
They had to really sell that young man. And I'm wondering, what it was that they sold him. But that's difficult because you haven't shown the propensity to get the ball to your playmakers. You haven't shown a propensity to have enough targets to spread the ball around to all these guys that are coming in. So he had an uphill battle just having the conversation with somebody. Let's not even get into actually landing them here.
Yeah, it's only been 1 year for Hugh Freeze. And this is a conversation I think you have after year 2. But after year 1, right after you land a top 10 class is not the time to have the conversation about which way is the way to do it. So they had the type of year 1 that a lot of people anticipated. Mm-hmm. Based on where people felt Auburn was at, given the last coach got fired. They didn't think it was headed the right direction. They bemoaned the lack of talent at certain positions. There was no depth, and offensive line continued to be an issue. Quarterbacks were running for their life, no QB development. Those are not things that you fix overnight. And so I think that you go to high school, you find kids there, and you find, look, man, you put yourself in a position that if you have to go to the portal for a QB, you have so much talent around him that he's going to be stepping into. I've got these receivers that have been here for years. I've got a line that's developed, which you definitely are going to have to put together through high school for the most part, and we've got a system. We just need to plug you into it, and it works.
Right.
He doesn't have that yet. That's why I think going to the portal to do it is a bad idea right now. I think it works for the guys who have established programs and they have clear holes that they need to fill where they can show a guy where it fits. So just
and most of those guys still aren't majoring on the portal, right? Like the portal hasn't been the way. They're plugging in key pieces here and there. It's like, all right, we're like 2 pieces away. We'll go get those 2 pieces from the portal, right? It's not I'm 8 pieces away and I'm going to try to get 8 of them from the transfer portal. That's not how that's working.
Yeah, it's crazy. Look, man, SEC Mike, he's grown extraordinary platform. And, but on this, I was having a hard time finding a middle ground when I heard this. And at first, it came off and I was like, wait, I'm sorry, what? And then I sat back and I tried to be introspective about this and think, all right, is there any way Hugh Freeze could be doing this better than what he's doing right now? I felt like most of the issues he had were on the field in terms of how he managed the balance between, recruiting and game planning. Certainly there was improvement that could be made there. But he was highly successful at the thing that he put his mind to, given what he had to work with and where Auburn was currently at. This class was nuts. The wide receiver class, think about it. You showed nothing, and you brought in Cam Coleman and Perry Thompson, Malcolm Simmons, and Bryce Kane.
Yeah.
You were bottom of the league in passing. And you got those guys to come here. That's phenomenal. I don't that's a mix of NIL, obviously, and, a little bit of luck, I think, with Cam Coleman, because if Jimbo Fisher doesn't get fired, I still think he goes to Texas A&M. But, look, he put himself in position to capitalize on what happened there, and you got to give him credit for that as well, too.
Yeah. Well, let's pause. We're going to go to the comment section and let's talk about the job that Coach Hugh Freeze has done in both the portal and with his freshman recruiting so far. You guys are watching the Weekend Tailgate, brought to you by the folks at Golden's Cast Iron. We will be right back after this break with your comments here from the comment section.
This edition of the War Report is brought to you by our generous sponsors. The Opelika Rage Room in Opelika, Alabama. The Rage Room is a place where anger and stress find their ultimate release. Call or text 334-777-6688 to set up a session today, or check them out online at opelikaRageRoom.com. Golden's Cast Iron. Whether you work out, grill out, or chill out, You deserve the best life possible, and Golden's Cast Iron is here to provide the tools to help you do it. Check them out at goldenscastiron.com.
Guys, you already know the deal. Sign up for that patron membership. We are getting a lot of them. We need even more. SEC Media Days is coming. We're going to be bringing you guys lots of patron-only content. So plug in with us. Hit that join button, $5.99. It's a coffee. It's a Starbucks. $1 a month to the War Report for some great Auburn content. You can also give a Starbucks to somebody by hitting that gifted membership button. Again, if you interact with our channel at a high level, but you haven't made the decision to hit that join button, you're likely to be on the receiving end of one of these memberships. So we appreciate everybody for gifting. I saw we had some in the comments already this live stream. We aim for like 50 to 100, but we love any number that we get when they're donated. I want to thank show sponsor Vintage 2298. Go check them out at 2298 East University Drive in Auburn, Alabama, over by the mall, and Ace Hardware and the theater over there. Look, they have great food. And if you watch the mix, we host a lot of our mix segments right there at Vintage, where we can get some good eats. Look, man, if I'm looking for romance, Ike, Vintage is where I'm taking it. Great food, incredible ambiance, right? Quality food at great prices. The staff is amazing. The bathrooms are clean. The chefs are crazy good. This is the perfect eat spot in Auburn. If you haven't checked them out, please go check them out. And last but certainly not least, I want to thank show sponsor Rogue Shop. Visit rogueshop.com and hit code RAPPORT to get 15% off that order. Rogue Shop has been longtime sponsors of the War Report. And look, man, the Rogue Shop will help keep you calm in tough times. When SEC Mike makes you mad, the Rogue Shop has your back. rogueshop.com. Use code RAPPORT for 15% off.
All right, let's get over here into the comment section. We appreciate you guys dropping in with us. You are watching this weekend tailgate brought to you by show sponsor Golden's Cast Iron. We'll start it off by thanking Stephen Neely for getting us jumped off with some donations of memberships. He's got 5 of you guys hooked up there, so thank him for that random gift of membership there. Super chat here from Eugenia Akira, who says, outside of Texas, how many schools could even consider affording buying a team of studs year after year? It's the question we just asked. Like, is there even a path to sustainability in the transfer portal? If this was still the transfer portal of 2 years ago when it first started, where you get the one-time transfer, right? And then if you go another year, you have to sit out, right? And so there's less incentive, or it de-incentivizes young players from jumping in the portal multiple times. Then maybe, right, you could go get somebody who hopped in, like one of those stud 5 stars, 4 stars that you talked about, Mike, who they sat that first year, but year 2, it doesn't look like they're going to start. Okay, after spring, I'm out of here. I'm hopping in the transfer portal. You go scoop that guy up, and now you've essentially got a redshirt freshman on your roster who's a 4-star, and you've got him locked in for the foreseeable future. Then, yeah, you could probably go to the transfer portal and actually build a roster that way. But most of these guys, if they're in the transfer portal, they want to start immediately. And if it doesn't work out at that new school, they're going to hop in the transfer portal again. Yeah. So how do you turn over that much of your roster year after year and don't have guys behind them that you're building in your program that you've sold on a long-term vision? How do you do that year after year in the transfer portal?
Yeah. It's not sustainable. It's not sustainable. You need a good base of guys from high school that will carry your program year in and year out. When injuries happen, that will step up, that that are familiar with your systems. And look, man, if you want a flash in the pan at the skill positions, the portal is good for that. We've seen that. The portal helps really good players get out of bad situations at their program where they don't see eye to eye with the coach or how they're running the program. Certainly. But, at the end of the day, the portal was primarily there to benefit athletes, right? To benefit athletes. Programs are taking advantage of it, but the portal, Ike, was for the athletes. I'm at a program where I don't see eye to eye. They can no longer handcuff me, so I can go someplace where they can use my talents. That's it, right? Like I think that maybe people are looking at this backwards. Yes, some programs can benefit from the portal, but mostly the athletes benefit because they get a chance to restart their career. It was almost kind of like the advent of free agency in the NBA and the early 90s, like later in basketball. LeBron and a lot of those guys got a chance to test free agency in a way that their predecessors in the previous era did not. It's kind of what this is like. You give that athletes a chance to go play someplace where they can maximize their talents and their upside, and that's it. But there are only a few programs truly positioned to take advantage of that year in, year out, and that's because they have built something already sustainable where guys from the portal want to come plug in with you because all the pieces that you recruited from high school are there. You got it right at every position, but you had a bust at quarterback. Great. You go to the portal, you find a QB, and then you keep pushing.
Right.
You know, I mean, even Alabama, with all the success they've had at quarterback, they went out and got that kid from Notre Dame, like just in case. You know who they ended up going with? The guy they recruited out of high school.
Right.
Come on,
Exactly.
man.
Exactly. All right. Let's get over more comments here. Let me just I'm typing this in the chat and I'll just say it out loud so I don't have to keep typing stuff. Listen, I don't care what anybody's opinion is on here. I don't have a problem with anybody expressing opinions, even if they're repeating the same thing over and over again. Yeah, I don't have to attack somebody personally because you disagree with their opinion. You don't. It's not necessary. Just say you disagree and move on, bro. Like that's what I don't want happening here in the chat, man. Like, disagree with the opinion, keep it pushing. Cool. I'm cool with the disagreements. I'm not cool with the personal attacks, man. Y'all gotta chill, fam. Like, we're trying to build a community here. The community can't have an infighting like that with the personal attack. That's weak to me, bro. Like, chill out. Moving on here, Bo Hunter says, I hate people think we've given up on Walker White to get Juju. I want to see a battle and have a quality backup at Auburn. This is a good comment here. I like it.
Yeah, I like it. I just don't. I don't know how much Juju wants to battle. I don't know how much any of these kids want to battle these days. They're built different. You know, there's a lot of entitlement in today's college football. And guys expect to play, and they're going someplace where there is a vision that they may play. I'm not saying that's what's happening with Juju. I'm just saying it's something to consider.
Yeah.
Walker White is different, man. Like, he came in with the attitude that he was going to have to work. And, you know, that's why I like this young man so much, right? That he was going to have to battle and that he was going to have to get better, right? And if we're going to let somebody pass a guy like Walker up, he better be it.
Yeah. And it's so rough for a true freshman to be it, though, right?
Yeah.
Like, you can't point to very many examples. The examples are so few and far between that I think people making it a foregone conclusion is where I get like why is that? Why is it definitely going to be the case?
Yeah.
Hey, he might be super talented. It just doesn't seem to pan out often. And you have to remember, this is another thing you have to remember. Sorry to cut you off, Mike. Mm-hmm. You've got guys on this roster right now who are wide receivers that they don't want to go through the growing pains of a freshman QB unless that guy is that guy. Yeah. So they've got to get QB right next year. They have to. If this year doesn't go amazingly, you 100% cannot miss on your quarterback next season and expect to continue the pace that you're going right now with wide receiver recruiting specifically.
Yeah, I think when you look at the programs, again, that have sustained success in college football, they're handing the torch to guys who have been in their program. Look, think about, like, Bryce Young, Tua, and Jalen Hurts were all dynamic athletes.
Do you think all three of those guys stay there in this era of the transfer portal?
I'm not sure, but where I was going with this is dead smack in the middle of that, you had Mac Jones.
Yeah.
And arguably by the numbers passing, he had, I don't even know if arguably, probably the best season of the four.
Statistically, I think, yeah.
It was the best season of the four, right? But he wasn't the flashy name. He was the guy that was in their program that stepped in and filled that gap there until the next dude took over. And, they won a championship behind him. I still think that they show me the program. So, or, Jaden Daniels, for example, he transfers in from Arizona State.
Mm-hmm.
He had a year in that system first. Then he blew up.
Right.
Right. And LSU has been recruiting at a high level around him for a long time. So that's
my
whole thing. Yeah,
their crazy. High school recruiting they had high school recruiting working at LSU, and then they went and got a transformational piece to add to it.
Right? To add to it, right? Yeah, because there are not a bunch of transformational quarterbacks out there, right? Like they're just not. There are a few game changers truly in college football, and it worked out. You get Heisman seasons when you plug them around generational talent. Same thing happened with Joe Burrow. Jefferson and Chase, those were guys that they recruited out of high school. Burrow came in, had a year in the system, and then one of the greatest seasons we've ever seen, arguably the first or second greatest season we've ever seen at quarterback there. So it works, but it's not possible if you don't have a strong base of high school recruiting. I guess that's my point.
Yeah.
Right? Like that, it's all started with that strong base that you could plug those guys into and then get those championship seasons out of them. But, where's the example of them going and getting, 6 skill guys from the portal and then winning a championship?
Yeah, like I said, the closest
that's not
you've
happening.
gotten is Florida State last year, and even them, they didn't win a championship.
They didn't win it. Yeah.
The injury happened, of course, but they didn't win. And a debate can be made whether or not that Florida State team would have won a championship, even if they had made it with their starting quarterback. They were narrowly winning some games over there in the ACC with him as the quarterback. So super talented team. I don't know that they beat the 4 teams that made it. I don't know that Florida State's hands down better than any of those 4 teams. So I don't know. Brad Browning trying to correct the record. He said he lost to Vandy his first and last year, not the 2 years in a row that he beat Bama. So first year loss to Vandy was, I guess, in most minds equivalent to that last year's loss to, a group of 5 school. But then the last year they were falling apart at that point in time when he was there. So it is a little bit disingenuous.
Was he even coaching when they lost to Vandy?
I think he coached them that full regular season. He had just already like all of
in
that
2016.
Yeah, they just had to vacate a bunch of wins. But the point there still is that it's a little disingenuous to make that a portion of his record when there was a lot of other extenuating circumstances around what happened in that final season. So, and Coach, let's be clear. This is not me trying to defend Coach Hugh Freeze. He has some bad losses on his jacket too. He's had some great wins, got some bad losses out there as well. So, again, I'd push back on the overhype of Coach Hugh Freeze. I think people think that he's done a great job of building programs. He's been an offensive play caller that's done really well, and at one point in time was considered to be one of the best offensive play callers in the country, and certainly in the top 10 in the country. And he's been a tremendous recruiter throughout his entirety of his career. But I think that's the vast majority of what people are giving him credit for. He hasn't won anything in his career. So to say he is a championship coach is an overblow. But I don't know that anybody's saying that. So I do wonder when he says he's not buying into the hype, what exactly is that hype that he's not buying into?
Okay. Yeah. I mean, so he resigned after the 20. Okay. Yeah.
Brad Browning again saying, I think he was saying that a dollar store QB is better than PT. All right.
Yeah.
I think what he was saying is, or what I took from that is you could get a middle of the market Walmart QB and he could come in and compete with that. That's how I took it. Peyton Thorne is all right, but you could have gotten somebody better than him out of the transfer portal, and he didn't have to go to the upper echelon of quarterbacks to do that.
Facts.
Let's see. Carmack says that guy has made it known that he doesn't like Hugh. I can't say that I follow him, but I've heard people say this.
Yeah, I've heard this a lot. Again, he had problems with Hugh Freeze that predated his time at Auburn, and if anything, credit for being consistent, I guess. But to me, it's just you can have your beef with a guy, I guess, but facts still matter. And the idea, I just don't know if you're saying with a straight face about anybody that is focusing on high school recruiting, I don't like how he's doing it. Like, okay, so you don't like how Saban and Kirby are doing it? Like, you know what I mean? This is why, because those guys are focusing on high school recruiting.
Yeah. Well,
Right.
I guess his point is that that's not going to work in this day and age. You're gonna the landscape is changing. You have to start making the portal a higher focus. I don't know how you've made that assessment so far because you haven't seen it work.
Yeah.
Eugenia Akira comes back. You have to ask yourself, how likely is it that the entire Freeze Four, Robert Lewis and Lambert Smith, all fail this year?
That's where I started this when we were talking. Like, the series of events that have to happen for this thing to turn into a 6-6 or worse season for Hugh Freeze are very unlikely. You have 8 home games. You've got probably a dream start to the season with A&M, Cal, New Mexico, and Arkansas. All 4 winnable games. So you could reasonably start 4-0. And then you got Oklahoma at home. So if you have it together by that game, you maybe have 5-0 going into Georgia. Now you've got that tough stretch there where it's, Georgia, Missouri, Kentucky after that, all on the road. But I don't know. Like I said, I think that if they improve at all, if there's any improvement, you see better than 6-6. And there's no basis in Hugh Freeze's history to say that they're going to get worse in year 2. Where are you getting that from?
Yeah, I find it hard to believe. But listen, I'm willing to come back on here and say I didn't see this coming at all at the end of the season.
Sure. If it happens, it happens. But
Miller Howes jumps in and says Will Redmond is also a major factor for being on staff and will help fill the holes through the portal. This is an underrated. I mean, I think we talked about it, but this is definitely Hugh Freeze recognizing a blind spot of his of like, I don't know that I do the portal very well. He openly admitted to that. The portal's not his thing because he's better at the relationship thing, and it's harder to build those relationships quickly when you have the transfer portal stuff. So he went out and got a guy that has proven that he's a good evaluator of talent and trying to fill in places where he doesn't do particularly well, which again calls into question this idea that Coach Hugh Freeze has abandoned the portal in favor of high school recruiting. He's just saying, I'm not good at that. Let me go get somebody who is good at it, and we can do both well.
Look, Freeze is in the, I don't want to say minority of coaches. Like, he's still in the group of guys who they don't like the messaging around NIL. And like, he understands that NIL is part of what you have to do now, but rest assured, for the same reason that like Saban retired and he said my message no longer resonates. You got kids and all they want to talk is money, and he didn't want to recruit that way. I get that. He built a winning program off of promising competition and hard work, and I'll get you to the league if you do your part. Now it's a lot of money talk, and I think that Freeze is still old school in that way. He wants to talk football,
right?
All this money stuff, because largely the way the rules were originally set up, it wasn't something that was supposed to be within his control anyway. So I want to talk about the things I can control, which is how this team runs and your development. So I just don't know, man. Like it's. I don't know. Like, we're making it an either or. It doesn't have to be an either or, but you have to make smart moves in the portal. You have to make smart moves in the portal, and I think that they've been trying to do that.
Yeah. So let's pivot and land the conversation for today in this. How well do we feel like Coach Hugh Freeze has done in his recruiting on both fronts? Right. So Auburn last season, or this first full recruiting season under Coach Hugh Freeze, top 10 recruiting class, right? Again, if you say Coach Hugh Freeze can't recruit out of high school, you're crazy. Top 10 recruiting class after not having much success on the field is phenomenal. He is in the top 10 already right now going into this next recruiting class. Killing it in the high school recruiting. His first full season in the transfer portal, he had a top 5 transfer portal class. Now, last year or this transfer portal class, top 30, right? Nothing super impressive about this year's transfer portal class, though I think they made some very strategic and key moves for guys. Now, we'll see how they pan out because, top 4 class, a lot of those guys didn't pan out. We'll go and we can revisit that class at another time for the portal. But a lot of those guys don't pan out the way that you probably think that they should. But how would we say Coach Hugh Freeze is done on all fronts as far as recruiting is concerned? I mean, I think you got to give him a pretty, I think you'd say he's done really well.
Yeah, from high school, A+, right? I'd give him a B from the portal. Now, a lot of the guys that they brought in from the portal last year didn't have a great impact.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just facts, right? Like, Shorter and Hooks and those guys that just suddenly, I think that not to any faults of his own, but like it was more system. But to me, Rivaldo Fairweather underwhelmed, but the whole passing game underwhelmed. Peyton Thorne underwhelmed,
right?
Underwhelmed. Yeah, like I mean, there were some underwhelming things there from the portal, but it wasn't for lack of trying. You went out and you got key guys at those positions and you gave them a chance to start, and it didn't work out. Ultimately, you got through year one, and you brought in a guy from high school that might already be better than anybody that you brought in from the portal, and Cam Coleman. So, it balances out eventually. Nobody was expecting fireworks in year one anyway. So you got through it, and you got to the other side of 2024 or 2023, and now you're into 2024 and you're trying to figure it out. From the portal, I just give them a B. I think they did what they could, because here's the thing. Auburn has not yet become a super attractive landing spot for top portal candidates.
Yeah.
Just hasn't. You haven't shown enough on the field yet, but you have time to do that. That's part of what the mission this season is going to be.
For sure.
Make Auburn a more attractive landing spot for candidates from the portal by producing more on the field in year two than you did in year one. If it's clearly trending up, that portal recruiting message becomes a lot more effective. I just think it was very, very hard in year one, given where they started and how they did. And that's the piece of this that I think that maybe SEC Mike is missing. Right? It's one thing to say we need to be going after this guy, but it's another thing, right? I admire coaches who they know, like, look, we're not just going to recruit a guy because he's got a bunch of stars. We're going to put energy into the guys we think we can actually land. To some extent, that's the balance in recruiting that these guys have to, you sink a bunch of resources chasing a player that's never going to come to your school for a number of reasons.
Right.
Whether it's too far from home or like, you know what I mean? All these little things that players consider. So you got to put the energy where you're most likely to be successful. And I think that is something they do. That's why I give them an A on the high school side, because that's what they did. They put a lot of energy into the right guys, and it resulted in a top 10 class. And on the portal side, again, evaluation, we say this all the time, is not an exact science. And a guy can look good on paper and show up and in actuality not be what he looked like on paper. Yeah. So what do you do with that? You just try to have more hits than you have misses in that regards, and a strong high school base to back you up in case they don't work out.
Right, because if they don't work out, then you can turn to one of those young guys that you didn't want to have to play so soon and say, hey, listen, I didn't want this to be the case. Yeah. And I think that's where you are with a guy like Keandre Lambert-Smith this year, right? Like, you don't expect Lambert-Smith to bust out, but he's your insurance policy in case one of the two super freshmen that you have out there, and this is not disrespect to Bryce Kane or Malcolm Simmons when I say this, I'm talking about guys who are going to play outside receiver, and they fit the mold of what Coach Hugh Freeze wants to do from that standpoint. In case one of those guys isn't ready out the gate, you have a Lambert-Smith there to say, all right, I'll give one of you guys time to develop. One of you guys got to come on and make it happen this year, because we didn't go get two. We went and got one. But if in case both of you aren't ready, I've got somebody who I can throw in there right now who's played a ton of P5 football, and we can go out there and do those things, which I think is an extremely intelligent way to go about the transfer portal.
Yeah. I mean, recruiting, I don't have an issue with with how they've been bringing in talent necessarily. Like, I have taken most of my issue how they've managed the talent they inherited, but we're going to move past that conversation because eventually you're going to weed all that talent out and it's just going to be your guys, and we're going to talk about your guys. So, in year one, I wanted him to do right by the guys he inherited. And I think he did by some and not by others, but it's time to move past that conversation into how are you doing with the guys that you've brought in? And we're just 1 year into this thing, man. So I don't know that you can fully judge how he's going to do that just yet. So, but I do know that you got to focus on those high school kids, and particularly around the lines, because you know what? It's easier to get a lineman to sit and wait his turn than it is a top wide receiver or QB or running back, right? Like, so you got to focus on getting those linemen out of high school. That's the thing that's always set the SEC apart. When you get to the higher levels of competition and the Pac meets the SEC, they get demolished in the trenches. They just do. That was the difference between Auburn and Oregon in 2010. You remember that game?
Yeah.
Right? Like, I mean, we were wreaking havoc on that guy. What was his name? Darren.
I know.
Whatever. Yeah. The quarterback for Oregon. It didn't do nothing. Right. Yeah. Nick Fairley was back there just causing havoc, and they've not seen a guy like that all year. I remember on one like read option, he was back there at the point of exchange in the red zone.
Yeah, Nick
and they didn't know what to do
constantly all season.
Yeah.
He was just a game wrecker, right?
Yeah. We had those guys.
If you're talking about how do you build a really good program, and this is something we've said consistently. A lot of people say this is not as if it's a War Report unique thought. It's building it in the trenches. I don't care whether it's the transfer portal, high school recruiting. You have to start there. If you have not built your team around dominating the line of scrimmage, you started at the wrong place.
Right. But you're not getting a whole line from the portal.
No.
You're not even getting most of your line from the portal. You're getting a piece there, here or two, because you got one guy
or if
that
you
didn't
do,
work
you have
out.
zero depth. You have no depth.
No depth.
Everybody
right,
behind him is probably trash.
Yeah, dude. Good trenches are built from high school recruiting, and those trenches are the difference between the big boys and the guys who can't get over the hump. Period. Right? Like, the Georgia defenses, I mean,
Michigan's
think about
defense last year.
Yeah, think about this, right? Bo played Georgia 4 times.
Yeah.
Right? He had his worst game versus Georgia at a Pac school with a Pac line and a Pac defense. And they, and listen, Georgia's a different monster, but again, highlighting that was a team built through high school recruiting that he went up against in his 4th try. And it was hard. He arguably had his worst game because the average amount of talent around him, from the trench standpoint, there was a difference. There was a difference there.
Yeah.
So all I'm saying here is high school recruiting is not going to be less important in the portal era, right? No. There's more opportunity for the athletes, I think, than there are for the schools. Like, I mean, I think the portal it's for the athletes, man, to get out of places where they either got lied to in the recruiting process or, you know what I mean? Something didn't pan out the way it was sold to them, and they can go someplace else and play. And you can pull at Aiden Holloway and be like, I'm going to Bama. Okay, well,
that guy.
The portal's for you, bro. Yeah. Right? How much did Bama benefit from that? I don't know.
Yeah.
Did they get better?
I mean, they probably have a very quality person to warm a bench seat for them.
Yeah, so. Right. That's what I'm saying. Like, how much better did Alabama get through that? I'm not sure they got much better.
Yeah.
But Aiden Holloway got the opportunity, and that's kind of my point, man. Like, the portal really, like, it's important, and you got to do it. And,
yeah, 100%. That's why I disagree with Dabo Sweeney's comments on the portal. It was like, the guys that we had. He basically said they didn't sign a single person from the transfer portal this year, and he was asked about it, and he said, "Well, I think the guys that we recruited from high school are better than what we had available to us in the portal." Essentially, that's not a quote, but I'm paraphrasing. He basically said, "I've got guys that we recruited from high school that I think are better than what I've evaluated from the transfer portal." So he didn't feel the need to go and get anybody else. And to me, he has seemed very anti-transfer portal, anti-NIL. Like he's not willing to embrace the changes in college football at all and is sticking to his guns.
Okay, I get it. Yeah, he's the extreme on the other end.
Yeah. And so again, like if this entire SEC Mike rant was about Dabo Swinney, he'd probably have almost no argument.
He'd have all our support.
Yeah, I'm just like, okay, because it makes sense right now. The only portion of this that doesn't necessarily make sense is Dabo's got rings, right? But like, if you're saying a coach has been unwilling to embrace the changes and what they've done has shown that they're stuck in, Dabo Swinney fits into that. I just don't think Hugh Freeze fits there. And so like that's where the statement becomes nonsensical for me. And it's like, this feels very, I don't like Hugh Freeze, not I disagree with Coach Hugh Freeze's tactics.
Yeah, and that's where he got called a lot out on social media. It was, this smells of some kind of personal bias because it's year one. And, you know, again, he pointed to the hype. And I'm like, well, he's got hype around his recruiting class because it was a good recruiting class. So that's earned hype. But outside of that, what other hype is he talking about? Like, I have not heard a lot of hype around Hugh Freeze outside of just recruiting. But, you know, from his
other than like Auburn fans wanting to believe, right? And like, but
that's every program, right?
Yeah, but the national punditry and the conversation around Hugh Freeze, the vast majority of it is Auburn's this sleeping giant because Coach Hugh Freeze is such a good recruiter. Like, you see all the things in place that allow him to recruit well. They could put together a program that can be competitive under Coach Hugh Freeze because he's going to go get the talent. That's where it's been. If you hear JD Piquel talk about it, if you hear Josh Pate talk about it, they're all talking about Coach Hugh Freeze is going to recruit his butt off and get a bunch of talent in there. And everybody also says the question really is about whether or not the QB position is going to be able to hold it down this season.
Yeah.
That's not Hugh Freeze hype. They've got a bunch of talent there. Do they have the right guy at trigger for it? Not can Coach Hugh Freeze coach it. So I don't understand the hype. Also, it feels as if this commentary around transfer portal or whatever assumes he has some blank check that he's unwilling to cash in terms of transfer portal talent.
Yeah, and that's the part of this that if Hugh Freeze is never going to be able to say out loud, but it's something that we've said on our show. There is not an unlimited pot of money for you to go to the portal. As a matter of fact, we're getting pretty close to salary caps,
right?
in college football. So there is a pot of money that is being shared between collectives and what usually is the traditional fundraising arm of the athletic departments. So if I'm a big time donor and I donate to athletics, now they're trying to figure out, how do we get, if I had $1 million to give every year, Ike, well, 500,000, usually just $1 million to Tigers Unlimited. But now I'm being asked by On to Victory to support the program in a different way, but it doesn't mean I've got more money to give. I got $1 million for you. So 500 to Tigers Unlimited, 500 to, On to Victory. You guys figure out what to do with it. So, when they went out and got Peyton Thorne, and I'll stay away from the numbers, like, somebody foot the bill for that,
right?
To get him here. And after year one, when people thought Auburn would go right back to the portal to get another QB, I'm like, I'd pump the brakes there, because I'm not sure that they saw enough of a return on investment from just 12 months ago,
right?
For him to have a strong case to go back to the money people and say, I need more money for another quarterback.
Right.
No, like these rich people who are giving this money, they're not rich because they just throw it away for nothing.
And that's why, like, the whole, $1 million versus dollar store comment, which again, I think is kind of ridiculous. I'm not thinking Peyton Thorne was that median guy last year. He was the guy who wasn't like
median guy, yeah.
Right. So but again, they tried it that way last year and it didn't work. So your thought process has to be, well, I got to swing for the fences next time if I'm going to swing at all, or otherwise I'm going to be
Yeah.
right back in the exact same position again this year. And if I'm going to do that, I might as well ride with the guy I got.
Yeah, they it didn't work out. Like Grayson McCall was a name that was very hot that offseason as well too, but there were things that were in the way of him coming to Auburn. So it's just not as simple as go to the portal and get who you want. All right. And those guys have to want to come here. And for them to want to come here, you have to build a roster that they're going to want to come play on. But there are so many other factors. In my conversations with athletes, I'm telling you, even outside of football, have their family being able to come see them play matters. Right. Getting home, in case of emergency matters to them, the whole family feel. There's so many different things that these athletes consider. And if you're a top portal prospect, you have your pick of the litter. So you're going to go someplace that meets all your needs if you can. That's it. And it might exclude some schools that either the only way they have to fill the gap, Ike, is money. You say, I know this is far from home, but here's a bunch of money and your family can fly out whenever they want. Right. Like, I mean, that's all you can do is just throw more money at it and say, hey, like, I know when I moved from Phoenix to DC, I wasn't adverse to living in DC, but the cost of living there is crazy. And I loved Phoenix, but you know what? The money was too much to turn down. It completely negated any negative I had from leaving desert climate, which is amazing, by the way, for cold weather climate, which I hate.
Yeah.
Well, they paid me enough money to consider it. So, that's where a lot of these athletes are at. And that money is not infinite, man. I'm telling you, it's not infinite. And like fans and pundits alike need to just get it through their head. Like for Hugh Freeze doesn't have a blank check. He's got to manage what he has. And the collective has to find ways to raise the money for a lot of these guys. I'll stop on this. It's why we're here. Other programs are getting in trouble with this. They're over-promising money they don't have, and they're reneging on promises, on NIL promises to athletes.
Programs who have more money than Auburn, by the way, are doing
Auburn, are reneging on promises that are made to athletes right now. And so if you're trying to operate within what you can actually do and not overpromise, look at the situation that Florida landed up with that guy who they promised like a $13 million NIL deal or some crap. Right. That turned into a media crap storm for them. But now if I'm an athlete considering Florida, I'm like, they throw dollars my way. Do you
I'm
mean
thinking
it?
twice, right? Exactly. I have to think twice about it. It's like, I hear what you're saying, but like, I need some more assurance, like something. And like, what do you like? You've put yourself in a position now where your word doesn't mean. And I think more than anything else, this is the thing that Coach Hugh Freeze is trying his damnness to fight. I need my word to mean something.
Yes. And now listen, he has in private interviews with us, both on camera and off camera, he's talked about this repeatedly, right? He is trying his damnedest to do this thing, to make sure it's done the right way. He doesn't want to accidentally do anything wrong either. Right. I was told a story. Hugh Freeze went to go see a prospect, went to go watch a game, but there was no admissible contact allowed during this time, right? And man, but he could talk to him on the phone as long as the athlete called him. And like Freeze was just like, it would have been an absolute violation for me to have come in contact with this athlete face to face. He sat in another room. He said he wanted to make sure there was a wall always between them, so the appearance of impropriety could not even be suggested. Right. And this was the athlete that told me this story. Like, listen, man, he wasn't going to break a rule there. And I'm like, I loved hearing that story from Auburn's head coach. I loved hearing that story. It said to me, I was like, okay, you're going to try to play within the rules and you're going to do what you can, because we all know when the hammer drops, Auburn's one of those schools that they're really going to go after.
Yeah.
They got to handle everything perfect. Yeah. Right. And so I'm looking at it and I'm just thinking there's a lot to navigate. It's just not, I guess one of the biggest problems that I had with what SEC Mike said was he made the portal sound like it was such a simple solution to all of this. You just got to go to the portal. You just got to focus more on the portal. Well, there are a lot of factors that factor into whether you can get guys in from the portal. It's not that dissimilar from high school that you have to have a program that guys want to go to. And right. He's currently building that. So, I had an old boss that used to say this. He says, when you don't know what to do, you do the thing that you know how to do.
Right.
And in the new era of college football, if he doesn't understand the NIL landscape, he's going to lean hard. He's going to figure that out. But while he's doing that, he's going to lean hard into the thing that he knows how to do. And that's recruit kids from high school.
Yeah.
I have zero issue with that. I think that is the absolute right thing to take because he's got a team around him that's helping him figure out the NIL landscape. This is one of the things I thought that was Harson's downfall. He didn't have a team around him that understood the SEC. He didn't have a team around him that understood the landscape of Auburn and like the politics of Auburn and the things that, I think that he really thought he could just transplant what he did at Boise here. And there was they had to adapt. They didn't adapt to the way that it's done here. I believe he wanted to do things with integrity, sure. But if you ask him, I know from talking to him and his staff that there were a lot of things that they wish they had done differently. Freeze has those people around him. I'm telling you, he has those people around him, and they're doing their best to make sure that he can navigate the things that he may not be adept at while focusing on the things that he's really good at. And that's not a bad way to go about this. So, yeah, I don't, like I said, man, I hope this didn't sound, I have respect for other people in the media and their opinions, right? So, similar to what Ike said, same way we don't want people attacking each other in our comment section. I don't really want to attack another media member over their opinion about something.
Yeah, I can disagree with your opinion without attacking. I don't know him personally to attack him. I don't,
right.
I mean, yeah,
right.
He's allowed to have, I don't think it's a very good statement. But
the idea is what we're attacking because I don't think that it's very based, and to the extent that maybe there might be some personal bias mixed in with that opinion. I think it's important to call that out and say, hey, there's actually no factual basis for what you're saying, because it's not as if he's ignored the portal.
Right.
He's not ignored it. They've just been very, I think, selective and meticulous about how they've gone around selecting guys from the portal. And of course, there's the money side of it that none of us will ever be privy to all the money conversations that happen, but you just have to know that that's part of this and that's going on. And just because they didn't get a guy, there just may have not, before he goes after a portal QB, he might have looked in the last cycle and said, look, I have enough money for a quarterback.
Not for one that's better than the one I have.
Correct. Yeah. So we're going to ride with the guys we have, and then we'll go there. But if I do go after one, he has to be a can't miss game changer, because that's how I'm going to sell it to the money people to give me more money for a quarterback. I know I just asked you for X amount for Peyton, but this guy is 4 times better, and we're going to be SEC champions if we get him. Yeah. The staff, I know I keep saying I want to end, but the staff, it was Trooper Taylor and another coach that went out to go see Cam play at Blinn. They came back and they told Chizik, we have to have this guy. This is it. I remember hearing stories about Tebow and the Florida staff saying, if we don't get this guy, they told Urban, if we don't get Tim Tebow, it'll set our program back 5-6 years. That's how they felt about Tim Tebow. So they went out and they said, hey, we're going to put our resources into getting this guy because we feel this way about him. I think that that's the way Hugh Freeze would have had to have felt about a quarterback to get a guy in the portal last cycle. Yeah. He would have, because he was going to have to sell it. He was going to have to sell it with his heart to the powers that be, to be like, I know we made a mistake, but this is the guy. Please give me what I need to go get this kid. And if he wasn't that strongly convicted about it, we here at the War Report knew that they probably weren't going to get one, because we weren't hearing that he was that strongly convicted about anybody in the portal. Right. There's some guys that were taking a look at, but yeah.
You mentioned the whole Tebow thing, right? And this, I'm going to kind of put a bow and tie back into a conversation we were just having. They had Tim Tebow on that roster. Now he was already starting. It didn't stop them from going and recruiting Cam Newton. They still went out and got Cam Newton to recruit to Florida and was like, he's going to be the next up. And Cam had to be okay with sitting for a year. But Cam knew, you listen to Cam Newton talk, he knew he was that dude walking in, true freshman. And he was like, all right, but I got to wait until it's my turn. Now, it didn't turn. He didn't hit the transfer portal because he was tired of waiting, right? There were other circumstances that led to Cam Newton leaving the University of Florida. But that's the way that's big boy recruiting and saying, I don't care who we got as our starting quarterback. I still want the best next dude to be on my roster as a quarterback in waiting for the next season. And I have to figure out a way to keep that young man patient while we figure out what his process to getting on the field is going to be. Same thing with Trevor Lawrence when he was up there in freaking Clemson, right? Trevor knew he was that guy, freshman. Now, he ended up playing before the end of his freshman season, but he was on the bench. And he knew he was going to be on the bench when he walked in the door.
Yeah. That's
big boy recruiting, though. We got a starter in waiting. I'm still going to go get the best 5-star prospect I can at that spot. And if the guy who I have pans out, then this will be my next guy.
Yeah.
That's how you got to do it. And I'm tying that back into the whole Juju Lewis conversation about whether or not Auburn should go. Yeah, go get him. If he wants to come to Auburn, and figure out how to get him there, and then figure out how he plays into your progression at quarterback.
Yeah, it's just interesting, right? Because Kelly Bryant was pretty established by the time they recruited Trevor Lawrence, right? And in our situation here at Auburn, the potential starter will not be as established as Juju Lewis. Right. So it's not like you're bringing him behind a guy who's going to be up to started for like 2 years or whatever.
Yeah, sure.
And I think that changes the conversation a little bit for the guy that you're bringing in. But and for the guys that are here. So like I say, it's his job to balance this and to know which direction to go. But you recruit the best guy every year. It's just tough, man, because you're making commitments to kids. This is why I think Saban had the most effective recruiting pitch. He had built his program to a point where he just didn't have to promise anybody anything.
Yeah.
To get them to come. He said, this is Alabama. You're going to compete no matter what position you're at. And that's that. If there was a time where Alabama was paying recruits, I think it was a long time ago. Over the last 7-8 years of Saban, I don't think he needed to at all. You just tell them to come, and I'm going to get you to the league, especially if you're a 4 or 5-star. You're going to go to the league. If you do your part, I'm going to get you to the league. And that's it. That's all he needed to say. So he could get a guy to sit behind another guy because he also had a clear history of bringing kids in from high school and it being a succession to the next guy.
Right.
By year 2, you're going to be a starter. By year 3, you're going to be a starter. So you're going to come in, you're going to sit for 2 years, but we're going to make sure that you're ready to go when it's time to hand the torch. Or if there's an injury, maybe sooner. It worked out pretty well for them. It did. And the only guys who are having to go to it's when you have a miss. It's when your guy is not ready to step up that you go to the portal and you find a guy. You keep recruiting those kids from high school and then you transition back to that succession as quickly as you can.
Right.
Those are the kids. That's how you sustain a winning program.
Right.
But
how you refresh instead of having to, or you reload instead of having to rebuild constantly.
Yeah. Refreshing from the portal that's like hitting the lottery every year. That's how I see the portal. It's literally like hitting the lottery every year because to get that guy, you have a lot of things have to go your way. They do. And, from high school, it's a little bit easier because you're I feel like in the portal, you get lucky. But in high school recruiting, to some extent, you make your own luck.
Well, I mean, because there's more guys that you have to bring in, right? Your portal class. Okay, let's look at, and God, we keep saying we're going to end this conversation.
We're way over time, yeah.
I mean, this year, Ole Miss brought in 24 guys from the transfer portal. 24. Texas A&M, 28 guys from the Colorado has 42 guys on their roster from the those are not sustainable transfer portal. You cannot be bringing in. Auburn this year has 14 commits from the transfer portal, right? Let's look at the better programs out here in college football perennially. Ohio State, 7. Bama, 15. Texas, 11. Right? We're talking about teams that are perennially in the top of Georgia, 11. If you're in the 20s, you had a lot of work you had to do because your high school recruiting was buns.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, there's no two ways about that. If you had to go get 20 some people, which is what Auburn had to do last year, your high school recruiting was cheeks.
It was bad.
Yeah.
It was bad. So again, great point. And I said, there's only a few coaches doing it at a sustainable level to be competitive. But to your point, there are no championship examples of that where like you're into championship hunt year in, year out. Now maybe that changes a little bit more with a 12-team playoff, but with a 14 playoff, it was impossible.
Yeah.
All right, like, because once you get in a playoff, anything can happen. Anything could happen. But the getting into that 14 playoff, man, it was just so hard. The margin for error was still very tight, even though we let 2 more teams into the conversation over the BCS. So the high school recruiting is still king, man. There's a reason why football is the most popular sport in the country, right? It's because high school football is strong, almost like, you know what I mean? It's the most popular sport at that level.
Yeah.
We're invested, like, I mean, if our best athletes wanted to play soccer, the U.S. would dominate soccer. Yeah. I this might be a little nationalist of me or whatever, but like,
I mean, athletically, I just think that, whatever again, this goes back to the Hugh Freeze. What you concentrate on tends to be what you're good at, right? And he puts a lot. If the United States put the kind of investment into a soccer program, they'd have a better soccer program. They just would. There's no two ways about that.
Yeah.
If soccer players could be stars the way that they are in Europe and in South America.
The reason why soccer and baseball, I think, are kind of like worldwide games is because all you needed was the ball and some open grass to play, right? To start to play soccer, you just needed a soccer ball. You could make some makeshift goals, and like there's all kinds of ways to play soccer, right? Meanwhile, only a few people, when it comes to golf, because access to equipment, and it's expensive to play golf.
Yeah.
I can imagine trying to play that as a kid. There's no way we could afford it. It would go broke. It'd be like dinner or golf, right? Like I'd have to make some hard choices. But football in America, that's what we invest so high. We're so invested in it at the high school level that how can it not be the way to build a program? That's part of what makes college and the pros great is that there are a ton of kids who are developing at a young age when it comes to football and learning the game. They started like peewee now. So, or they have for a long time. I don't know, man. Like I said, I just thought it was a wild take to say, hey,
it's absolutely wild take. Like I'm actually struggling to find someone who agrees with the take, right? And I haven't gone through all the mentions on this, but I'm just like, you're getting flamed consistently for this take, and it's not like the only people who agree with you have to be trolling, because it's like show me something substantial that actually backs this up. I don't even get it.
Yeah.
So anyway, all right, let's get out of here. We've given our Baptist preacher closing like 3 or 4 times already. Eugenia, thank you for the gifted memberships there. Always appreciate you guys continuing to support in that way. There are more ways that you can support the War Report. Mike, tell the people what they could do.
Hey, you guys know the deal, man. Hit that join button. $5.99 a month will get you there. We appreciate everybody for joining on as patrons. This helps keep a lot of the extra work we're doing for you guys going. So if you like the mix, we're going to SEC Media Days. We're going to bring you guys a lot of content from there. We need 5,000 more memberships before July to make that happen. So tell your friend, sign up your grandma, sign up your dog, get him a membership. Sign him up for an email address. If he has an email address, he can become a patron. I want to thank show sponsor Golden's Cast Iron. Visit goldenscastiron.com/rapport. Use code GETYOURWEIGHT UP for 15% off your weights. And Code TWR for $65 off fire pits and Kamado grills. I got my dad the grill. I'm about to go hit the grill right after this, Ike. And we're going to grill up some steaks for Father's Day to celebrate my father, who, is my hero. My father is my hero. And so we're celebrating him today. But yeah, goldenscastiron.com/rapport. Please go buy from them. Also visit Vintage 2298 if you're in the Auburn area. Vintage 2298 hosts.
Yeah, if you don't know how to grill, just go pick up your stuff from Vintage.
They got a grill there.
Yeah,
and they're
already
pretty
cook it
good
for
at
you.
it.
Yeah,
they're pretty good at that. I posted a steak of during my thing with Elijah on my Twitter. So if you want to know what it's like, go to my Twitter, and it's like the third tweet down or something. But I got a picture of a big old steak for Vintage there. They do great work there. The owner there, Randall Baldwin, they're great partners with the War Report. We appreciate them for supporting us. I want to thank the Rogue Shop. Visit rogueshop.com. Use code REPORT for 15% off that order. They got lots of stuff that will keep you calm in today's climate of bad takes on Hugh Freeze. It's there. The Rogue Shop is there for you. Also, check us out on podcasts, every single podcast network. We're there with the Auburn Express College Loop, Uptempo, and Just a Sec, bringing you guys lots of great audio-only content.
Yes, indeed. And also, you guys do the necessary sharing the video out there on social media at the War Report. When you do it, hit that thumbs up button on the video before you get out of here. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you're re-watching this, join the conversation. This is a huge misconception that we don't like people who disagree with us. I'm going to say my piece about what you say, but I welcome the commentary. So please give us your opinions, even if you think what we've said is the most ridiculous takes in the world. Love to hear what you guys have to say. Follow us on social media. We are at The War Report on Twitter and Instagram, TW Report on TikTok. Yeah. Go watch The Mix. It's out there right now. Elijah McAllister, Coach Johnny Harris sat down with Mike G for interviews. Make sure you check that out. We'll be back at you guys with more great Auburn content next time. But until then, and as always, War Eagle.
War Eagle.